All right, folks, welcome to another XenTegra Webinar Wednesdays. I'm excited this week. It's crazy to believe that, hey, it's a short month. We only had 2 this month, and next week is Thanksgiving. I figured, you know what, a lot of people are taking it off, so I'm not doing a Webinar Wednesdays next week. But December is packed with a lot of great stuff. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I want to welcome my friends from Stratodesk this week on Webinar Wednesdays, and we're going to be talking about no touch and putting the no touch into every device. And we're gonna have a little fun and do a lot of demo today. I'm excited. So I got a great panel today. For those who don't know me, my name is Pete Downing. I'm the CMTO and host of XenTegra's Webinar Wednesdays. On the call today, I got 2 great guys, and yes, they are related. I won't say how, but maybe they will. So Nick, if you want to give yourself a quick intro.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. This is Nick. I'm one of the sales directors here with Stratodesk.
Cool. And then Rich, give yourself a quick intro.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Rich Severson, and I'm the Senior Global Solutions Engineer at Stratodesk. And as you might guess by the senior, yes, I'm the senior of the 2 of us. And given the fact that you pointed out, Pete, yes, we're a father and son team. And Nick jokes that he has the best tech support in the company because if he has an issue, he just goes to his dad.
Hands down, quick escalation.
Nice. No, welcome guys. And then Megan, who's was supposed to be with me today, she got pulled away with on a call. So Megan is my partner manager and helps coordinate all the Grubhub. So again, you probably hear her name and her voice week to week. So okay, we are on Webinar Wednesdays, and for those who are new to it, we are using GoToWebinar. And one of the things I strongly encourage is Q&A. So please put any question and answer into our dialog box. By the way, if you make a comment and I comment back and I delete it, it's just to keep the Excel spreadsheet clean. I try to keep just questions in that. But Q&A is encouraged. Please ask questions. I interject them where I see fit and have a little fun with it. So please ask questions, and I'm going to be asking you questions in a little bit. Our agenda is simple. For those who attend, you know the drill. But for those who are new, we just do a quick intro. I do some polling, and then I let the vendor do their thing. So nothing too crazy here. We just like to have fun and make these fresh and interesting for y'all. All right, if you haven't already, head over to XenTegra, events.XenTegra.com. We have a lot of great events actually tomorrow. Tomorrow, it's crazy. I think this was done by accident, but we got 3 events tomorrow. We got a NetScaler ADC event, which is pretty chock full. But there might be a few more seats left. We got a liquidware app layering focused event in the afternoon. Definitely recommend joining that. There's an awesome giveaway around that. And then finally, I am doing another event in the afternoon, so definitely check that out. But head over to events.XenTegra.com. And if you're looking at WVD, I'm doing my monthly WVD session on Friday. If you want to know what's been going on with WVD, definitely join that. And I keep that fun and fresh. Podcast.XenTegra.com. You can check out all our great podcasts we do. Andy, our founder and CEO, loves podcasts, but he also likes doing them. So I'm his producer, and every now and again I make a appearance on one, but definitely check those out. We do 3 different ones. We're actually going to build in 2 more, and then next year I'm launching a new one. Webinars.XenTegra.com. Check out the upcoming webinars. I got a lot of great guests coming up in the month of September. I got Doug Brown, I got Brian Madden, and I got a guy named Steve Kaplan, who I like to call him the ROI TCO master over at Nutanix. I'm excited about those, and I'm actually trying to get 1 more guest before the end of the year to have a year recap, a year in a review, and that's going to be the theme of Webinar Wednesdays in December. We're going to be doing a lot of cool giveaways, so you don't want to miss those. All right, Grubhub credits. Yes, we give away Grubhub credits. I just like to clarify, yes, you have to give us a business email. And, yes, there are rules, right? So please be nice to Megan or myself when we reach out and ask you for a nice email or who you are, make sure you are who you say you are, etc. And then finally, we are giving away a Apple iPhone or a Samsung Galaxy this month. So for those who finish and attend today, I'll be doing the drawing next week and announce the winner. And I'll have 2 other prizes, a nice North Face Ridgeline jacket and a XenTegra hat. So yes, that's the giveaway for this month. And you definitely want to check out some of the other events. We are giving giveaways dedicated to those events as well. And I'll talk about this later, bronco.XenTegra.com. head over there. You could win a Ford Bronco next year, but you got to meet the requirements. So there is some requirements. I'll talk about how you can get those requirements, and you can do all or none. So it's up to you. All right, let's have some fun with some polls. Let's get some data, and we are going to ask a bunch of fun questions. I love getting the audience involved, and if you are on the web client, full screen it, and you should be able to see the poll. All right, so the first one, just to get everybody warmed up, my enterprise is currently leveraging Stratodesk today, and we'll let this come out there. And again, I like to get at least 50+% people voting, and as we're waiting, I see a couple questions. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm gonna guess people can hear me. And he's probably gonna try to dial in again. So if people can hear me, hit the hands up button on your GoToWebinar just so I can see it. All right, so folks can hear me. There might be a couple audio people. All right, we're good here. Let's call in last call for this poll, and we're gonna close this and share it. So we got a lot of no's, guys. So you got a lot of selling to do, Rich and Steve.
Well, actually, it's interesting because that helps me to understand how much of the product I need to go through and cover, right? Because we want to make sure everybody understands it. And I hate covering the basics if we get a bunch of people that say, "Yeah, I already know what it is," kind of thing, right? So.
Yep, exactly. So awesome. So we got a fresh crowd here, and I like that. So all right, so let's have a little fun with the next question. My enterprise currently uses thin devices in production today. So you might use one or more. Pick the one that aligns to you best. Again, this is more just to help us understand the makeup of our audience and what you're using in production. And I always like this question because I call it a thin device. I don't like calling it a thin client. That's just me. And I think that it's just a better term. And that term is evolving now with the remote work that is happening with this lovely pandemic we have going on. All right, so last call for clicks. So going once, going twice. And again, if you're worried, the data is anonymous. No one else can see your data, so don't worry about that. And I'm going to say last call for clicks and share. So we got a lot of no's in production. So I think, again, great insight here. A lot of wise HP devices and an even split between, the friendly competitor and other. So we're going to keep that in the back of our minds as we talk about the solution. All right, let's talk about end user compute. So what end user compute product are you using today? EUC product. So pick your primary. All right, so are you primarily Citrix user? Are you primarily a VMware Horizon? Are you using Microsoft RDS? Are you using other? And then if you're not doing any, just pick none. And again, this is more just to help us understand, what our audience is using, because this great product works with all the above. And I'm excited. And I'm going to ask another question in a minute that's going to play to the cloud. So give me a little for the next polling, but we'll give this a couple more seconds. Last call for clicks. So going once, going twice, and close. So we're going to share this. And we got a lot of Citrix folks in the audience, which is expected. That's the trend I typically see. Pretty decent spread between the other vendors and a lot of nones. So it'd be interesting to see what you guys are doing around cloud and remote work, etc. So all right, let's go to the next question, which is my enterprise is considering or using Windows Virtual Desktop, so WVD. Now I asked this because one, it's good to understand, are you aware of it? And two, it helps me understand if you'd like to test it, because if you'd like to test it, I'll tell you this, don't spend money out of your own pocket. There's ways to get funds from Microsoft to help test WVD. And if you're interested on, what is WVD, join me Friday. I'm doing an all-day session. Well, not all day, like 10 to 3 on WVD. And I go through the nuts and bolts of, what is it, how you get it up and running, and some of the changes that have occurred over the last 6 months. All right, last call for clicks, going once, twice, and final call. All right, so we got a lot of folks kind of at the top tier of, yes, So it's interesting, and I've been seeing that grow month over month, which is kind of interesting. And then finally on the bottom, I see a lot of no's, and that's typical. And I think there's a lot of, I'll just say, skepticism around WVD. And again, join me Friday if you want to see how it works, etc. All right, let's do my final two. This is the fun one. So my enterprise has a remote worker strategy for the foreseeable future. So today into the foreseeable future. So pick what your workforce is doing today and then into the foreseeable future. And then I have another question that will kind of leverage this question. So we'll give this a couple seconds.
So Pete, while we're doing that, so regarding the WVD thing, it's interesting because we've kind of seen the same thing, right? Where more and more people are considering WVD, and so we're obviously doing an update for our WVD client probably this week, probably doing a release late into next week. But what's interesting is our management platform, NoTouch Center, can actually run natively in Azure as well. So if you want a complete Azure control plane, we can provide, the VDI and the management control plane all in Azure. So
cool. All right. So interesting data snippet here. So about, I'll say in the middle, it's like you guys are in that 30 to 80% range. And it'll be interesting to see how this evolves into the future. If you're in the no bucket, I'm guessing you're in a line of business that, you can't work remotely. You're either in healthcare, you're in retail, et cetera. So it's interesting to see these stats. And it depends on the audience too, the week too. But I've seen the middle tier is typically the one I see is the biggest tier. All right, so let's talk about post-pandemic. And I'm being optimistic here. When this pandemic ends, my workforce will go to working from I should say to a physical office. I don't know why I put from, but my head was thinking another way, but to a physical office again. And again, this is general, but but what I'm seeing, and there's a lot of data out there that suggests that one, it's a great benefit, and two, workers are more productive. And I kind of question that maybe once this pandemic does end, right? We're kind of forced to be home, which basically forces us to work more. But it'll be interesting to see how that evolves once things start opening up again and et cetera. But just an interesting snippet here. All right, so we're going to close this poll and share it. So a lot of you say yes, we think we'll be back in a physical office again. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe your HR steps in and says, nope, we're going to allow remote work. But hey, you never know, right? All right, so let's jump in. And if you're not following Stratodesk or XenTegra on social media, please do. Yes, this session is recorded, and it eventually makes its way up to the interwebs on our YouTube channel. So definitely check that out once we get it up there. And with that, we're going to jump into talking about Stratodesk. So as we cut over to Rich, any kind of overview you want to give on the company, how it started, and what the audience needs to know, a little bit of the history, Nick and Rich.
Yeah, absolutely. So Stratodesk actually originally started in Europe, actually Austria to be exact, right? And 2010-ish moved over to the US. And of course, we are now the fastest growing software solution focused on end user computing and IoT. And we principally do that with our NoTouch OS, as well as the NoTouch Center, which of course Rich will be talking about here a little bit more. We are, as Pete alluded to earlier, completely multi-platform and multi-architectural supported, meaning we can support VMware, we can support Citrix, we can support WVD, Parallels, Inuvoca, many others. And of course, multi-architecture, meaning x86, x64, 32-bit, 64-bit, and the ARM chipsets as well. And of course, as Stratodesk has continued to grow over the years, we've developed amazing relationships with organizations like ClearCube, who in fact can provide you all of the above from an architectural standpoint from an endpoint. So that's kind of a little bit of a background and quasi high level overview for where we're at today. And with that, Rich, if you have anything to add before we get started.
No, other than like kind of like Nick pointed out, right? The fact that we are multi-architecture. I mean, it's key to remember that NoTouch OS, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Has the flexibility that we can run NoTouch OS on laptops, existing PCs, other vendors' thin clients. We do a lot of that. And then at the beginning of this year, I mean, fortunately for our company, timely wise, we actually introduced the ability to actually run NoTouch OS from a USB drive called NoTouch Go, which was adapted pretty quickly for people to be able to suddenly move their workforce from the in office to at home. So that's kind of it. The thing to remember is the fact that and I think that's one of the things that I really like about Stratodesk the most is the fact that our flexibility, right? We have the ability to run on different hardware. We have the ability to run in different architectures. We support all the different VDI, EUC platforms. And one of the things that we're seeing is we're actually seeing multiple organizations that are recognizing, hey, we're using Stratodesk as our end user computing platform. We can put Stratodesk NoTouch OS on, we can redo our PCs, we can redo thin clients, etc. And oh, by the way, we happen to have these production control systems that we need to be able to manage too. And we think we can do that with Raspberry Pi devices because they're low cost, they're, CPU capabilities. And wait a minute, Stratodesk OS runs on Pi. So does that mean we can manage our end user computing endpoints and our IoT endpoints with the same management plane? Absolutely. So it kind of, if you will, reduces some workload for IT when it comes to end user computing and IoT integration. So it's a really nice flexible platform. So, again, the flexibility of architecture hardware, the flexibility of end user computing, and certainly the flexibility of the platform and the OS itself. So with that, and as Pete pointed out, I don't mind answering questions along the way, certainly given the fact that the poll showed that there's a fair amount of people that are not Stratodesk users. So, as Pete pointed out, if you want to put in questions in the chat, I would prefer to I don't mind answering those questions. I typically don't do prepared demos just because, I like it to be interactive. So Pete, feel free if you have questions along the way as well. So what we'll do is I do have some stuff that I'll talk through that points out some of the key elements of Stratodesk. So let's first talk about what is Stratodesk, right? So first, Stratodesk, basically we have two primary products. We have NoTouch OS, which is a Linux operating system that's developed from the kernel up by Stratodesk. It's developed to be specifically for endpoints, so it's high secure flexibility. It gives us the ability to control all the applications, if you will, and the services and everything that's on the endpoint. So we have very good control of it, which makes it very secure. And again, because it's developed by us, we have the ability and the flexibility to be able to add different applications and controls to those devices depending on what we need and what customers ask for. So that is NoTouch OS. Again, it goes on the endpoints. Like I said, we actually do, it's interesting. We actually get a fair amount of customers that say, hey, we're using XYZ vendors' existing thin clients, but we're finding that they can't update the firmware fast enough, or we can't get the latest version of Citrix on that hardware. At least the vendor's telling us they can't do it, and or it's going to take weeks or months to be able to get the updates. And we can actually turn around and provide those, like the latest Workspace app. We typically turn around the Citrix Workspace app within 4 to 5 business days. We have a direct feed from Citrix. So if you're out there and you're using Citrix and you need to get to the latest version of Workspace app, certainly Stratodesk is something you want to consider. So anyway, so that's NoTouch OS.
Hey, Rich. So quick question from myself. So can you give the audience kind of an indicator? How often do you update your OS? Is it quarterly? Is it monthly? I mean, obviously if it's monthly, it might scare people, but the key I'm trying to make here is you guys are constantly making sure you're in line with the various vendors you work with, correct?
Yep. So interestingly enough, the way that our system works, our build system works, is we actually update our software probably weekly, which to your point, scares a lot of people, right, to some aspect. Yeah. But here's the thing, right? Again, because we have the flexibility of doing all the different VDI platforms, if we get an update from VMware, we want to make sure that it's enabled. If we get an update from Citrix, we want to make sure that it's enabled. So what we do is we publish those and we build them and we integrate those updates into the operating system, and we provide that to the customer portal. So inside the customer portal, you'd be able to log in and you'd see all the different firmware versions as a customer that are available to you, and of course the release notes. And what's nice about it is we don't force our customers to update. I mean, we actually have customers that are still running on firmware from last year. They've had no reason to update. So unless there's a CVE or something like that that comes out that says, hey, we've got to address this, we haven't changed our Citrix environment or we haven't changed our VMware environment, so we don't need to do those updates. So they don't. So we leave that up to the customer's choice. And certainly, if Citrix, like what'll happen is Citrix will come out with an update or VMware will come up with an update and the customer says, hey, we've got to have the absolute latest. We don't want to hold them back, right? So we make those updates available. The customer can log into the portal and say, hey, we're still doing a pilot, so therefore we have to have the latest version. They go to the Stratodesk portal, they log in, they get the latest client, they can test and verify that everything works.
Cool.
So
yeah.
it's and the nice thing is our delivery mechanism and our software is pretty easy to deploy. And I'll talk about this in just a minute. And we can deploy those firmware updates to devices that are inside the infrastructure, as well as those are for work from home or at home users, just the same. And we'll talk about how that works in just a moment. So anyway, so that's kind of the ins and outs of NoTouch OS, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But from an enterprise perspective, when you're managing endpoints, again, Pete, I like your idea of not calling them thin clients, right? Because they're not thin anymore, right? It just depends on where they are and what they are. Especially if you're, converting somebody's existing laptop to a live boot so they can work from home, right? But the point is the ability to manage those devices once you get them. And that's what NoTouch Center is. So Pete, just a quick question. I want to make sure you guys can see my screen, correct? I don't want to be talking away without you being able to see it.
We can see your screen. Yep.
All right, good, awesome. So what you're seeing on my screen is NoTouch Center. That is the management plane for NoTouch OS. And NoTouch Center is a virtual appliance that we provide. You can download it from the customer portal, and you can download it as an eval. It's a fully working copy, as well as NoTouch OS. And we provide it in VMware and Hyper-V instances, right? So whichever fits your environment. And so the virtual appliance itself for NoTouch Center actually has two different interfaces. There's the interface that you're currently looking at that is used to manage the appliance itself, and we're going to go through that. And then there's the interface called NoTouch Center, which is what's used to manage the endpoints. So on the virtual appliance, the things that I like to point out here, there's a bunch of stuff here, but obviously one, we have the ability to manage the different images, and these are the different updates. And you notice there's ARM, 64-bit, etc., all these different versions. And I can control whether it's used for Pixie Live or if it's Pixie Installer. We actually have had people use things like SCCM. They put NoTouch OS with the Pixie Installer images out there and convert their existing devices to NoTouch OS using SCCM on the fly. So it's kind of cool the way that you can get NoTouch OS deployed. And then there's the NoTouch Center, the file store. So yes, it does come with a file store, and we provide you the URL so you can take a look at what's there. The maintenance and diagnostics, all the typical things that you'd expect to see for managing an appliance. The other thing I'd like to point out in here is that NoTouch Center does come as a Pixie server as well. So if you are going to use a Pixie environment, you have the ability to have a Pixie server built right into the platform. No need to go out and build a special server for that. Then there's the different operations for the virtual appliance itself. Probably the most important thing here is this right here, is this TCMGR hostname. So why that's so important is anything that's running NoTouch OS by default on boot will try to resolve TCMGR. What that means for you in your infrastructure, right, is if you set up a DNS A record for TCMGR pointing to your appliance, anytime a device boots NoTouch OS, it will try to resolve TCMGR. If it can, it will automatically report in. And we'll go into a little more detail about how that works and what that really does for you, because that's how it becomes truly no touch, right? Or hands-off deployable. And I'll cover those things in just a few moments. Then there's the system information certificates, obviously the firewall configuration. So we provide a visual representation of what the firewall is on the appliance. That way you can add, remove, change, modify services, depending on what you're doing. As example, if you're not using Pixie, obviously you could turn off the TFTP services. So we just make it a visual representation, easy to manage. I think probably one of the other key things that we introduced this year was the cloud extension. And this has been really important for those customers that are now, on premises or in the office users and at home users. So basically what cloud extension is cloud extension is simply another instance of the same VA, right? But simply configured as cloud extension. So if you look here, you can see my network, I'm at 192.168.145, but I also have another instance of my virtual appliance running on a completely different network at 50.15. And if I go look at the cloud extension piece, you see here it's turned on and it's asked for an API key, and I'll show you where that is. But basically the purpose of cloud extension, what that does is it gives you the ability to manage NATed devices or work from home users just as if they were inside the infrastructure with the same controls. Meaning, looking at this representation, and by the way, this is on our KB, so you guys can look this up if you want to. Just go to stratodesk.com, KB and the cloud extension. But so let's say that this is me as the administrator, right? So I've got the browser-based interface connected to the NoTouch Center, and I'm managing my devices that are inside the environment. And you see all the ports and services that are going back and forth. Now, pushing users to home, or even those companies that have had existing home users, whether they be call centers, et cetera, typically managing these endpoints becomes very difficult. So again, what we do is we take another instance of the exact same appliance to spin it out in the DMZ, right? And you can point those endpoints to the public interface of the cloud extension, and that gives you full control, firmware updates, remote shadowing, announcement, shutdown, messaging, all those controls, just as if they were sitting here with those NATed users sitting out in somebody's home. And what's key about it is the fact that that management control works by sending data outbound using that API key from the primary NoTouch Center to the cloud extension, so that none of your endpoint packets or protocols are actually traversing through into your data center. So it's a very secure method and ability to manage those endpoints that are NATed at work from home users and have the same level of control, just as if they were sitting inside the infrastructure. All right. So that's cloud extension. And like I said, you can go to stratodesk.com, go to the customer section, KBs, and you can search for cloud extension. You'll see, all the information about it. And then you see here, it's basically 3 clicks to set it up. So,
Rich, so quick question for you. So so as far as like, can you bring up that diagram really quick? My obviously my background, I have a lot of background with like Citrix NetScaler, and so because you're doing like 443 and 6667, could you front end this with like a load balancer like F5 or Citrix?
As far as I know, you can. I haven't run into any difficulties with it, Pete. We've got people that have deployed it, but the key thing is I guess the key thing to note is the devices will open a WebSocket connection to the cloud extension, which is what gives you real-time control. So as long as the WebSocket connections aren't broken through the through ADC or anything like that, you should be able to have full control of them. Yep.
Okay, cool. And then another question came up, and I'm going to guess the answer is yes, just based on how I understand all the tools I work with. But because you guys are using standard ports, et cetera, you can work fairly nicely with security, information, and event management. So SIEM tools, like Splunk or et cetera, right?
Yeah, again, this goes to the flexibility of NoTouch, right? So, and again, I point people to our KB site, because it is really important. There's a lot of information there. You'll see it looks a lot like a wiki, right? Because we do actually use the wiki platform. And yeah, so we have scripting engines that are built into NoTouch Center, so you can forward data out. You can set different events, different alarms based on logging data. So again, you have the flexibility to do the things with NoTouch Center that you want, right? So if you need to pipe that data out, you can. If you need to set events, alarms based on data, you can do that. Okay. Does that answer your question, Pete?
Yeah, that answered. And I got a question, but I want to wait till you get a little deeper because I think it's gonna align to something you're gonna bring up in a little bit. So.
All right. Well, yeah, I saw a question come across about VPN, so we'll talk about that too. So, yeah, I try not to pay too much attention to the questions. I leave that to you, right? But while you're talking, I just decided to look over and see what was going on. So. Anyways, so again, so this is all the stuff regarding the configuration of the appliance itself. And like I said, the cloud extension has probably been one of the best things that we did, having developed that earlier this year. The other thing that I do want to point out about NoTouch Center is NoTouch Center can be in your data center. It can be in your cloud service provider, such as XenTegra. It could be in AWS. We can actually even run NoTouch Center natively in Azure. So it just depends on you as the customer where you want to run the management plane. Example, we had an existing customer earlier this year with 18 to 20,000 devices, and when they suddenly had to move all of their users to home, they called us and they said, how do we move all of our devices to at home and still be able to manage them? And so what we did is we actually stood up an instance of NoTouch Center for them, right? And then within NoTouch Center, you have the ability. You like that? So right in the middle of a demo, go to NoTouch Center and it says found. There we go. There's the option to provide an alternate management URL. And so simply what we did is we just changed the management URL, the non-standard management URL, from their instance on premise to the public instance that we had provided for them, and did the announcement to all their devices. And then they did a public announcement to all their employees and said, hey, we've just taken it, changed one setting on all of your devices. You can now go to your desk, pick up your endpoint, take it home, and we'll be able to manage it for you. And so they were able to move approximately 3,500 endpoints a day because they didn't want to flood their network too much. 3,500 endpoints a day simply by changing that URL. And they told us, they said, had it not been for NoTouch Center and the flexibility to be able to change the management plane like that easily, this would have been a nightmare for us. But because you can think about taking a device from your desk to putting it at home, and now you've got to configure VPNs, you've got to provide different certificates and all those kinds of things. That would have been an absolute nightmare. But what they did is they just changed the management URL to the public facing, and then once it checked into the public facing URL, then they were able to say, okay, we know those devices are at home, they need to have this certificate, they need to have this VPN, and provide all those configurations as I showed you via the cloud extension, just as if they were sitting inside the infrastructure. So anyway, so now what I've done is I've jumped over to the NoTouch Center interface, right? And again, this is the part of the interface that's actually used to manage endpoints. And as I pointed out earlier in the configuration of the virtual appliance, the default host name is TCMGR. And the reason that that's important, as I said, anything that's running NoTouch OS by default will try to resolve TCMGR, and if it can resolve TCMGR, it will automatically report to the virtual appliance. Hence, I've got this device sitting here in the unassigned group, because what'll happen is it can say that it'll resolve the DNS record and say, I know where TCMGR is, I'm going to report, and then you as the administrator, you can choose that device, and then of course you can move it to a different group if that's what you wanted to do. So I can move it to the My Devices group or the Work From Home group, whatever I want to do. But reality is nobody wants to sit here and monitor this thing. So NoTouch Center has the ability to have different groups. You see here, I've got a group called My Devices, and I've got a group called Work From Home. And each one of these groups has the ability to have automatic assignment, and by default, automatic assignment is turned on. And in this case, you see I've got automatic assignment turned on for My Devices using my internal IP schema. What that means is that any device that, take it out of the box and boot up NoTouch OS, it can resolve TCMGR. By default, will resolve TCMGR, check into the virtual appliance, and because automatic assignment is turned on and it will match the IP schema, that device will automatically fall into the group called My Devices. Once it falls into the group called My Devices, it will automatically provision that device with the settings, connections, parameters, etc. that are part of this group. Again, this is where the no touch thing comes from, right? So think about that, right? If I took a device, so I set up a DNS record pointing to the appliance. I've got the appliance running as a VM. I take an endpoint out there that may or may not be running Pixie. And let's say I use something like SCCM to push out the live or the install option of NoTouch OS. So again, so the device boots up, it checks into SCCM, it pulls down the Pixie installer version, it installs NoTouch OS on that endpoint, it reboots, it resolves TCMGR, it comes into the appliance, it says, hey, I meet the automatic assignment rule for my devices. It falls into the group called My Devices and provisions it for my Citrix connection and does a reboot and connects to Citrix. So literally you can make these devices hands-off deployable. And that's why it's called no touch, and that's the power and the flexibility of Stratodesk. So now with that, a couple things that I like to point out, because a lot of people, the first blush or first look at Stratodesk NoTouch Center, they go, well, there's a lot of checkboxes. There's a lot of things that seem a little bit overwhelming. And it's important to note that anything that is unchecked is recommended default or quote unquote inherited. So this is an inheritance hierarchical model. So you see here, I've got multiple different devices, including Pi-based devices. And you also notice right now, I've got no provisioning to these devices whatsoever. But I can click on a device and I can see all the information about that device when it announced was what we call a check-in. I can see what hardware it is. It's, MAC address, host name, IP address, what version of NoTouch OS it's running, all the information that you'd expect to be able to see. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say new connection, and we'll just call it a CTX connection, right, for Citrix. And we'll throw that up there. And you'll note that now that I've got that connection set, right, is that connection is then going to propagate down to all the devices that are inside that group. So we're going to go in here and we're going to choose a connection mode, and we'll say workspace app, and then of course here I could put in my Netscaler URL or ADC URL, I should say, right? And then that information is going to propagate down. So it's key to note here, because there are the checkboxes, that means that this setting is set at this level. Again, the same connection, CTX, was inherited to all the other devices. You'll notice that it is going to be unchecked because it is inherited, and we tell you where you were inheriting it from. Okay? Now, the other thing that I like to point out, especially given the fact that we have a majority of Citrix people attending today, with our workspace app, you can actually, and I'm just going to do a quick Control F and do a search for version. NoTouch OS, actually, we include multiple different versions of the workspace app in NoTouch OS. Because what we found is we found many customers say, hey, we're on LTSR this, or we're using this version, or we're using that version of apps. Therefore, we have to have this version of workspace app. So we actually include multiple versions of workspace app. You can just go in and choose whatever one you need. And by default, we use the latest versions. Okay, and you see here we've already got the 2010-06 instance of workspace app included. Okay, so there's that. So that's kind of, and again, with the group settings, there's all kinds of different information. You can control the display settings, drives, printers, event scripts, extensions. I mean, the extensions is rather interesting, because it's one of those things. This is how you actually can add the Citrix Zoom plugin, right? You drag and drop it in, and then you choose the Citrix Zoom plugin from the file store, and then effectively what we're doing is we're kind of side loading that into the machines so that you'll have that extension available to you, right? All the different services, security, shadowing, all the things that you'd expect are all here. And I guess I should have pointed out when I chose that connection, If you look here, and we'll make this back to Workspace app, but here's all the different connection options, right? Avaya for desktop, SerpMonger for Skip, Citrix, Google Chrome, IBM, and Nubica, Chromium, Firefox, Microsoft, Nutanix, Frame, Parallels. Go on. You can see all the different connection options that we provide. And again, that's
so Rich, back to the kind of the question that came in earlier. If there's not one in the list, what's kind of the course of action, if you will?
So if there's not one in the course of action, what we would do is we'd say, we could do it for you as a custom image potentially. B, depending on what it is, we could also potentially build it as an extension, and or we could potentially test it, right? Again, we don't leave NoTouch OS wide open for security reasons, but it's also not terribly difficult. So I would say, what's the one that might be, the question that's not there?
So the gentleman asked about Pulse Secure VPN, which I don't know if you know, just got bought by Avanti recently.
So actually, that would be a VPN, right? That's actually not a client connection, which is handled a little bit different. And so Pulse Secure VPN, so we would typically handle it as an extension. So the way that works, and you see here that we've got, so what we do is we work with the customer and we say, okay, we need to understand what the client is, what the configuration parameters are, those kinds of things. And once we understand that, then we can create an extension where the configuration options for that VPN would be part of NoTouch Center. And then what you would do is you would take the quote unquote .deb file from that VPN and you would add it to resources miscellaneous, and it would become available as a download feature under the extensions. And so once you've added that, then you would be able to go to extensions and you would see, Pulse Secure VPN, and you would choose it. And like I said, what it would do is it would sideload that on the fly. And what's nice about it that way is if they did an update to the Pulse Secure VPN, you wouldn't have to come back to us. You simply change the file repository instance, and it would, the next boot the devices would get the update. And you see we've got a lot of developed already. So, okay. But it's also important to note there are several different instances of VPN already included with NoTouch. So it depends on what you're using, right? So obviously we do Open Connect, Any Connect. There's also several more. I forget off the top of my head while we're talking, but there's several of them listed on our KB site.
Sweet. All right.
And I've noticed it's 46. So there's a couple of things that I want to jump into real quick, and so we don't run too far late into the hour here. So
yeah, you got about it's like 5 to no more than 10 minutes. So
yep. So I'm going to show some. These are some of the really cool features that I think when it comes to supportability that are really important about Stratodesk. So so let's say that I'm the help center and I'm running I've got the interface into NoTouch Center, and Pete calls and he says, hey Rich, I'm having a problem. I'm trying to figure out why my webcam's not working in Citrix, and it just doesn't work. And of course, as an end user, they don't have the ability to log into the OS and make configuration changes because obviously you don't want them doing that, right? So the typical support person would say, all right, Pete, so tell me, who are you, where are you, what's your MAC address, what's your IP address? And I might get the right answer, I might not, what's your host name, those kinds of things. Those are all things that are supportability issues, right? So NoTouch OS has several pre-configured hotkeys. Control-Alt-W opens the wireless configuration panel. Control-Alt-S displays all the system information on the display. So I might say, hey, Pete, can you press Control-Alt-S and give me the MAC address? And Pete would go, okay, just a bunch of information just splashed on the screen. What's the MAC address? I don't know. Oh, it just went away. I don't know what it is. I didn't see it. So those are all supportability issues, right? But one of the other hotkey sequences in NoTouch OS is what we call an identify, right? So I'm going to go up here to identify, and you see there's nothing there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach over to one of my machines right now, and I just did a Control-Alt-I. I did an identify. Notice that pops up, right? Effectively, what that is that's that machine raising its hand. So now I can go to identify and go, oh, here's Pete's machine, right? I can now see where in the tree Pete's machine is. I can see all the information about Pete's machine, right? But Pete said, hey, Rich, I was having a problem with my webcam. All right, well, so let's see what's going on with Pete's webcam, right? So now what I can do is I can actually click on the web services. And what this is going to do now is this is opening the web configuration panel directly on that endpoint. And again, it's password protected, so Pete wouldn't have this information. So I can log in, and I can now look at the web configuration panel of that endpoint just as if I was sitting at the keyboard and mouse of that endpoint. And now I can go down and I can look at the diagnostic. I can see, all the diagnostic information about it. I can look at the log files. But, from a VDI perspective, what's really cool is I can click on USB. And typically with webcams and those kinds of things, it's USB forwarding rules, right? I may need to know the vid-pid pair of what that camera is. Well, now I can see that information without having to give Pete passwords, without having Pete to stand on one leg and press his finger here and I'll come up with some information. I can see that information. Now, let's say that I needed to be able to get that information out so I could send it to Stratodesk, right? Well, if I needed to get a support log or a support file out of that machine, typically I'd say, Pete, all right, I've got to give you the password. I need you to plug in a USB drive. And because it's Linux, I've got to tell you how to do a mount to mount a USB drive. And I want you to write this file out and then take it from your thumb drive and then put it in your personal laptop and email it to me, right? With Stratodesk, I don't have to do any of that. And remember, I can do this even if this is in your home, right? I can click on support file. And now what's happening is that endpoint is compiling all that data into what we call a support file, an LSF file, and it's going to pull that support file to my local downloads directory. So I can get all that support information out of that endpoint without having to ask Pete to do a thing, other than the Control-Alt-I to identify it. And boom, you see it just pulled it down to my downloads directory. Okay, so not only can I open the web interface to the devices, I can do, I can add connections. I can do an announcement. I can send audio message out to it. I can send a text message. I can factory reset it. I can reboot it. All the things you'd expect to be able to do, including the fact that I can now remote shadow that machine and connect and see what the user's seeing. So the key about this is using the virtual appliance, using cloud extension, with NoTouch OS, taking advantage of all the supportability features that are built in, such as the identify, I can support a user just as if they were sitting inside the infrastructure, or even if they are inside the infrastructure. And adding connections, this is all stuff that's done dynamically on the fly. I could go to this one machine and say, you know what, I don't want to do it to the group level. I want to do it to a machine level. So I'm going to create a new connection just for testing purposes, and we'll call this one RDS, just for fun. Or actually, let's do this. Let's say Chromium, right? We're going to create a Chromium connection on that machine. Choose the connection type to be Chromium, and we're going to send it to the Stratodesk website. And I'm going to choose that, and I'm going to say action announce, which basically tells that I wanted to send that change out to that device. We'll pop back over, and I'm going to wrap up talking, and here in just a second, you're going to see the screen flash, and that connection is going to show up on the desktop. So anyways, with that, I think I covered a whole lot. So I'll stop and allow Pete to throw in some questions here. And there's
so Rich, so I'm gonna take the question and maybe tweak it a little bit, because I think I know what he's asking. So let's pretend I got 1,000 PCs, right? And I'm gonna repurpose them to NoTouch OS. What's the process, right? Or do you guys have like Pixie? Do I have to go around to every device and stick a USB key in? Kind of what's the process to repurpose 1,000 PCs, let's say?
So, obviously that's one of those questions that's going to be somewhat dependent on the existing infrastructure.
Yep.
It's dependent on the location of the endpoints versus the management plane. So the cool thing is again, it's about the flexibility, right? So with NoTouch, with the virtual appliance, like I said, we provide a Pixie server. So you could do a Pixie install. You could use something like SCCM or other deployment tools that has the ability to provide Pixie images. You can do it via a USB. You can do it from the local machine. It just depends on what you have available to you. As example, we've had a retailer that had 2,800 locations. use SCCM to push out the images to their existing devices. Using Pixie Boot, they did the install, they booted up, they did the TCMGR, the devices checked in. So two guys did 2,800 retail locations over a weekend. So it just depends on what's available to you in the infrastructure.
Cool. All right. Yeah, that's cool. So, all right. So I'm gonna do a recap, but as I do my recap, please do ask any final questions you may have. The good news is they get recorded, and when we follow up, we actually do look at your questions and try to highlight those questions to see if we answered them or not. So definitely, please ask any final questions you have. If we have time at the very end, I may throw one more out there. But I do want to do a quick recap and highlight, how XenTegra and Stratodesk are working together. And don't jump off yet, because you want to hear about the Bronco giveaway. All right, so who is XenTegra? Well, XenTegra is a partner of Stratodesk, but more importantly, we're just a partner in general with a lot of great companies that we work with, and we were born out of the need for customer enablement. So we do a lot of enablement type activities, ranging from one-day workshops to webinars like this. But parallel, we try to be a good partner to our other customer, like Stratodesk and Citrix and all the great partners we work with. So what do? Well, you come to us, you want to build a solution. So you're going to come to me and say, hey, Pete, I want to deploy Stratodesk with Citrix. That's the solution. So we can not only provide you that solution, we can come in and help you build that solution. Then finally, we can sell you the various products underneath that solution. So yes, we are a reseller, but it's not about pushing paper. It's about building the solution that meets your needs. So my statement is simple. XenTegra enables you, IT, so your end users can be successful. So let's face it, right? If our end users aren't happy, guess what? The project fails. And that goes back to my roots of product management. And Rich, I'm going to guess you guys are not agile shop. I used to run product teams and development teams. And I'll tell you this right now, I'm a big design thinker guy, and I believe in always paying attention to the end user. So again, Stratodesk is a great partner of XenTegra. And if you want to know more about who our partners are, head over to partners.XenTegra.com, and you can check out all our great partners who XenTegra works with, and that list is constantly growing. Again, Bronco.XenTegra.com. Yes, you could potentially win a Ford Bronco next year. And we are giving away a Ford Bronco and or a donation to a charity of your choice if you can't accept the Ford Bronco. So, hey, we've all been here, done that. We've, I started my career off in IT, and nothing stunk more than getting a phone call on the weekend or at 4 o'clock in the morning and having to deal with an issue. And so one of the things we do offer is a full managed service stack, and we focus heavily on digital workspace solutions. So we can not only manage your digital workspace solutions, we can manage it in our own cloud, we can manage it on a preferred hosting service, and we can also just come in and manage it and implement it for you. So you definitely want to check out our managed service offering. And if you do a consult with Trevor and team, you get put into the drawing for the Ford Bronco. And yes, we are a CSP, a Citrix Service Provider partner, a VMware Cloud Verified partner, a Microsoft Gold, and we can do Azure Cloud Solution partner as well. Next, we do free assessments. If you do an assessment end to end, meaning you do the full assessment, get the results. This is about 4-hour commit on your side, and you get not just a, hey, here's your quote, you get food for thought and things you need to consider with your current end user compute environment and or networking. All right, so we do Citrix assessments, we do VMware assessments, we do Cisco and networking focus assessments, and we also can talk to you about your Microsoft licensing and highlight where you can make improvements with that. So again, our free, what we call micro assessments, you definitely want to check those out. You do one of those, you get put into the drawing. And then finally, hey, are you hiring? And if you are, hey, get us in touch with your HR department. We have a full staffing division within XenTegra, and you're probably going, well, why the heck does a reseller have staffing? Well, it's easy. We have great networks. We also have great ties into the community, also across the world, and in some cases, places you can't probably reach. So definitely check out staffing.XenTegra.com. You sit down with the staffing team, that gets you in the drawing for the Ford Bronco. All right, so that said, we will be following up with you. And if you want to dig deeper, please ask, and we can definitely dig deeper with Rich and team to get you a deeper demo, answer any questions we didn't hit, and even get you the solution and have you test it. So again, we will be reaching out, and if you have any other questions on any of the products we cover, please ask. So Megan, Jen, and a few other folks will reach out and be hopefully touching base with everybody who attended today. And I'm going to do last call for questions, and I'm going to look and see if there's any questions that I can answer quickly. Kevin, let's sync offline. I think that question is going to be a little bit more involved. But yeah, let's definitely sync offline because you had a lot of great questions. And again, thanks for joining. And I'm gonna do one final call to Rich. Rich, any final thoughts for the audience before we call it the day?
Just like I said, the key thing about Stratodesk is just the flexibility, the ability to do multi-architecture, multi-platform, IoT, endpoints, different VDIs. It's a pretty powerful platform. So been doing this for a long time, and Stratodesk is a great company to work with and a great company to work for. So
awesome. And Nick, anything on your side?
Yeah, so Pete, just thank you very much for having us here. Likewise, what Rich was saying, it's just all about the flexibility to be able to get the solution put in place that you need. Oftentimes you can't find a one size fits all for every environment. But from what I've seen coming from different hardware manufacturers, Stratodesk comes really darn close by architecting from the kernel level up to support all those different endpoints. So it's really a powerful and affordable solution.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining, guys. And again, my name is Pete Downing. I'm the host and CMTO of XenTegra. So shout out to Stratodesk for jumping on today and joining us. And join us post Thanksgiving. We have a great lineup in December. The focus is going to be year in reviews, and we're going to be talking about a lot of juicy topics with some awesome guests. So you definitely want to keep an eye on your email and register for those webinar Wednesdays that are coming up. And I promise you won't be disappointed. And we're going to be doing some cool giveaways. So with that, I'm going to say thanks to everybody for joining today. And as I always say, see you guys on the flip side, and have a great rest of your days, and happy Thanksgiving to all.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.